Hello, 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 Get Balanced 2020. How are you guys doing? This is Patty Hall of Get Balanced 2020, and I appreciate you stopping in and looking at my videos. We are actually on a very interesting subject today. So for those of you that have never seen one of my videos before, you can go down below and see getbalance2020.com, and there's a YouTube channel button at the top, and there's a whole slew of videos for you to work with your mind, spirit, and your body to transform them to a positive, healthy lifestyle and grow to the best person that you could be and what you were created for. So in the mind, today we are going to be talking about vices. Now, vices could be good or they could be bad. It's how we cope with stress. So if you haven't seen the video about good habits and bad habits, transforming bad habits into good habits, then that would be a really good conjunction with this because we try to break habits in almost everything that we do, bad habits anyway, right? So we all have some form of bad habit. We're human beings, so that's just part of it. But how do we cope with our stress? Do you have a habit? Do you have a vice? Or do you have an addiction? So we're going to talk about all three of those, but we're going to focus in on vices because we focused in on habits before and changing those, and now we're going to focus in on vices. So I want to ask yourself, have you ever thought about what kind of vice or habit you have? And is it a habit, a vice, or an addiction? So there's different levels to that. So what we're going to talk about first is sort of the definition of each. So if you want to get a piece of paper and pencil, like in all my videos, there's so much information, but if you're good at photographic memories or you want to come back and watch it, please do so. So what we're going to talk about first is habit, because that's what we went to on before on the last video. So do you have a good habit, a bad habit, and what is a habit? Okay, so I keep notes because I want to stay on track, so bear with me. So a habit is actually just a tendency to have, it could be good or bad, but it's just something hard to give up. We can give it up, but it's just a matter of choice to give it up. So it's not really something detrimental to our health yet. It could be, because we're looking at habits of our mind, we're looking at habits of our body. So they actually go in play, and that's what Get Balanced 2020 is about, is teaching you that your spirit actually speaks to your mind, and your mind is where your soul and your personality and your character are, and that tells your body what to do. So if we're a little bit construed in our head, which starts with our spirit, then our body is going to have some form of habit or not, right? So think of a habit that you have. Maybe somebody twirls their hair. Is that really a bad habit? Not really, because it's not hurting anything, but there's something deeper why they're doing that. Maybe they're nervous, maybe they're uncomfortable, maybe they're having to speak in public and they just don't know what to do. How about another habit? And that we can't control because that's physiological, is if we get nervous, what do? We get shaky, we get sweaty. That's a habit. That's something that we can actually learn to calm ourselves down, something that is psychological. Okay, so that's a habit. So especially when I teach nutrition and fitness, we talk about good habits in eating, bad habits in eating, how to break bad habits and how to transform those into good habits. That's a really key place that we have habits. And that's where a lot, same with exercise. Some people are just not exercisers, but we need to keep moving. So it's a bad habit to sit on this big brown ball back here all day long and not do some form of exercise. It becomes a habit. We become lazy. And when we do that too much, I have even done it during quarantine. It's like, okay, I'm getting lazy. I need to get moving. This is not a good habit to get into. So, and then we'll talk about if it's a good habit or a good vice. Sorry, I have a hair tickling my ear, so I don't know what's going on there. So now that we're looking at a habit, okay, let's take a look at a vice. It's almost like a next step up. So a vice is actually something that we do, but it is more of a negative connotation. So it has to do with our morale, or our morals, our character, our values. And sometimes that is faltering, or it causes us to fail, or it causes a little more hardship. And sometimes those vices can be psychological again, or physiological. So we got to understand what it is, what kind of vice it is. Is it a mental thing? Okay, I'm going to use an example. No, I'll wait until you use that for the next one. So, and a vice, becomes a habit. So it has some shortcomings to it. It's sort of like having just a little kind of a defect in, say, your car, for example. So your car has just a little defect, so it rattles if it goes over certain type of terrain or whatever. And then when it's running smooth, it has no problem. Well, that's the vice of that defect in that car, right? Well, we all have defects. I'm really sorry. We really, really do. No one person on this earth is actually perfect. Sorry to disappoint somebody out there. Okay, so we're talking about a vice. So it's sort of one step level up from a habit. Now, what's the next? Well, actually, these are step downs. They shouldn't be going up. They should be more step downs. So what's the next? An addiction. So what is an addiction? It is a habit that you literally cannot stop doing. It is actually very harmful. And it either could be psychological or it could be physiological. Now, if you don't know what physiological is, it's physical. It could be physically detrimental. It could be, really harmful to your health, or it could be deadly. Put it that way. The one thing about addiction, and we're not going to focus on this one because this is a huge, huge topic by itself. I used to work in chemical dependency, and this is a whole topic by itself, and that needs a whole different separate time for itself. It could be several videos, actually. But the thing about addiction, it could be anything. A lot of people don't understand about addiction, that it is usually physiologically or psychologically, that they just can't break it without professional help. Or you have to detox, withdrawal from something. Then that goes for anything. It could be, it's really funny. We say it could be drugs. It could be alcohol. Alcohol is a drug, people. When we worked in chemical dependency, we would ask somebody, what's your drug of choice? Well, it used to be heroin. And I'm like, oh, okay. What do you do anything now? Oh, well, I drink, but, it's a drug. It's an mind-altering drug. They sort of, I don't know where people think that it separates. It's a drug. So we're going to not talk about that. But the one thing I will say is, in all the studies and research of psychology and addiction, a lot of people out there who smoke weed, pot, bong, whatever you want to call it, weed is basically what we called it in my day, is that it is not addicting. It is a gateway, because you get a psychological thing, but it's not an addictive. It's not something that you actually need withdrawals from. It's something that you can actually break. So some people think, oh yeah, I am addicted to it. It's like, okay, you're psychologically addicted to it maybe, but if you were to take that substance away, your body wouldn't need withdrawals from it. It's not that kind of a drug, but it is a gateway drug to other things because of the high it gives and everything else it gives. So anyway, that's enough about addiction. So we're going to go back to habits and vices. So I want you to write down a couple of things that you think you might have a good habit, and then you might have a bad habit. So on one side of the paper, you'll write good habits. Other side is bad habits. And then what we're going to find out is if they're actually vices. So let me go back to nutrition. So a lot of people actually have a hard time breaking themselves off of sugar, right? Well, sugar is really an addictive agent. It really is an addictive agent, just like nicotine. Okay. And the thing bad about sugars is that sugars certain diseases crave and eat on sugars. It's like cancer. If you eat, the more sugar you eat, the more you grow and feed those cancers. That's why cancer patients, they say stay away from sugars, because it grows that cancer. So sugar is just not good all around. So if that's your habit and your addiction, then that's something that you need to get away from, because it then becomes your vice. It becomes all three. So let's take another one that's not actually an addiction. So you yell a lot. You have an anger issue, so you yell a lot. Like my neighbors, these kids at 6 and 7 cussing, or maybe you cuss a lot. 6 and 7 years old, cussing their mother out with the F word, S-bomb words, all these words, and she's just doing it right back. And I'm like, that is a habit, but it becomes a vice. It is something that is a coping mechanism, because you do not have the skills or the tools to know how to replace that with something habit, like a calming discussion, or a calming, instead of screaming the word F, F, F to each other, how about calming and say, you know what? I'm the mother. This is the way it is. You go do it, or you go in your room. That's a vice. So screaming and yelling is a vice. It's not a habit anymore, because it's gone to that next level. It has now created more emotional stress. It's created more, it could be physical stress, but it's also could be very, very abusive. So it could be very emotionally abusive. So instead of being a habit, oh yeah, I yell once in a while. Not too bad. But when you start using it in levels of not knowing how to communicate, and it goes to a screaming level, how many of you guys get into an argument and scream at each other and you really pay attention to what each other's saying? You don't. You don't. So that's when everything shuts down, and that's why it is a very bad vice. Anger management, a lot of people in anger management coaching or anger management counseling, they learn different ways to cope with that vice, because sometimes that vice won't turn just to be verbally abusive or emotionally abusive. It will turn to be physically abusive, and then it becomes detrimental to somebody else. So how do you know? Okay, so we talked about calm being the opposite. A good vice is being calm, trying to stay collect, showing authoritative, showing your standards, showing your boundaries, that kind of thing. That would be more of a healthy vice, right? So we need to look at each vice that we have and where it gets rooted from, and what is a good vice and what is a bad vice. So what we have to look at the vices for, and you can also consider this for habits, but I'd say go back and listen to that video on habits. But where we would do that is we would begin to look at the root of where that's coming from. So if we have a bad habit of cussing, why is it that you have a sailor's mouth or a potty's mouth? Potty's mouth. I get a potty's mouth. But why do you have that brown stuff coming out of your mouth? A lot of that has to do with maybe not having the skills and the self-esteem and the self-whereabouts, or even the education of communication on how to speak what you really mean. So instead of knowing what to say articulately, you come off with some potty words kind of thing. So it's learning about where these vices are coming from and how you cope with stress. Because a lot of the times we don't cope with things very well, and so we create a bad vice rather than a good vice, and then we end up going backwards rather than forwards. Because if we create a bunch of bad vices, then we create poor relationships with people, and ourselves a lot, because we cannot understand why you can't break them, or why it keeps happening, or why that cycle keeps going around and around and around like a toilet bowl, you know? So in a flooded toilet bowl. All right. So anyway, so we have to get to the root. of why we're doing a bad vice, why we're smoking, why we're drinking, why we're cussing, why we're maybe watching porn, why we're or nasty movies, whatever you want to call them, why we're sex addicted, why all these things. So a lot of it is to the roots and the base. And I will almost say most everybody that has something of that dysfunction is usually comes from a really rough growing up, maybe no parent, maybe abuse, whether it be mental, physical, emotional, sexual, whatever it is. And then you find something. You know what? Even if you watch somebody who jokes around a lot, even as a grown adult and they're joking around a lot, you think, oh, they're really, really funny. But then after a while, it's just like the jokes don't stop. A lot of people hide. That is a vice, to hide pain. It's not a bad vice. It's not hurting anybody. But the problem is it's hurting the person telling the jokes, because this vice is not allowing them to cope with whatever it is that they're coping with. It could be self-esteem. We're all broken. So wherever their brokenness is, maybe they grew up with a bad child, or, you know, some people, they've been in jail. Maybe they don't know how to cope in society and how to actually maintain in society and things like that. There could be so many things. I could spend hours on vices on a video. But the thing is that we actually have to look at deep down on a piece of paper, do some soul searching. Why is it that I smoke? Why is it that I drink? Why is it that I over-exercise? Now, people can be addicted to exercise. That's really healthy. But if the thing is that you go beyond over-exercising, that becomes an addiction. That doesn't become healthy. I mean, I know one person that every time I see them, they're either running, jogging, jumping, you know, and unless you're getting ready for something like the Ninja Games or the Titan Games, which I love to watch anyway, but those kind of things, I can understand the training. But 24/7, always going, your body's got to have rest. So it becomes something more of addiction. If exercise is a vice, you go and do it once a day to release those adrenalines, or release the endorphins, release all that toxic energy that you got through the day. Wonderful, healthy vice. But if you were to go to the gym 3, 4, 5 times a day, that's not a healthy vice. Unless you're, even for a pro bodybuilder, we never did that. Most pro bodybuilders, which I was an amateur bodybuilder, but we would even right before competitions, 2 times a day at the most. And that was a lot. And we aren't there for more than an hour and a half each time, if that. So, you know, you have to look at all what it is in your life that is a constructive thing that you are doing. Now, a vice that is not good for you, and I would put that on your pros side if you're doing the pro and cons. On the pro side, it is a constructive vice, something that is helping you and growing you and maybe getting you to break those bad habits. For example, if you smoke and you want to quit smoking and something's oral and you have to have it, or, you know, you smell that cigarette, but it's like, oh, I don't want a cigarette, I want to do something. I know a lot of people that actually chew on a toothpick or a popsicle, not a popsicle, what are those? Tootsie Pops. Those kind of things. The sugar is not that great, but neither is the nicotine. So you have to look at, I don't know who that is. Sorry about that. You have to look at what is healthy, what is not healthy for you. And constructive vice versus destructive vice. So instead of a cigarette, you do a toothpick, or you do that. And you gradually wean yourself off the toothpick or the Tootsie Roll. Maybe you won't for the rest of your life, but at least that's more healthy than something that is going to make your lungs black and cause you to possibly die from lung cancer. So those are some kind of things. Food. Oh my goodness. Food addiction is the worst. But if you're on your way to a healthy lifestyle, it is so easy to get caught up in bad habits. Boom, 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 just like that. So, for example, if you're trying to cut out all these complex carbohydrates, which are like, for those of that you don't know, that's like your pastas, your breads, your rice, your things like that, and you're trying to cut them out. And you're doing really, really good, but then you're noticing a little bit comes back in and a little bit comes back in and a little bit and more, before you know it, you're back to square one again. You can retrain your brain to get back and replace that with something else. Maybe replace it with almonds or nuts or certain fruits. Your fruits are sugar, so you got to be really, really careful. You could replace it with just healthy snacks, those kind of things, rather than dealing with all that. And if it's a dinner or a lunch, you replace it with green vegetables or even a salad. I know that sounds boring, but once your body gets used to it, it actually likes it and it craves it. So those are some healthy vice ideas. So what I would like you to do is I would like you to go through your habits, your vices, and your addictions. And I'm sure that everybody has habits and vices that are not good for them and that are good for them. So as I go through this a little bit further, the only other thing I would say is remember that a vice is something that is morally against what you believe in, whatever your spiritual belief is, or your moral compass is. So what I mean by that is, it's the way that you're raised and the way that you value things. So for me, if I have a standard and a boundary that I don't want somebody to cuss, and this is my standard, my boundary, and they keep saying the F-bomb like next door, then I have the ability to say, hey, that is not something that I allow. So if you want to be around me, then could you please not do that? Then also too, you find out if that is really important to somebody else or not. So finding out what your vices are, your standards are, and getting back to your roots. Sorry, I lost train of thought for a second there. But where your vices are coming from is from something to the roots, that either the root of you as a being, that either's, again, been traumatized, you haven't dealt with it. Maybe there was a father figure that wasn't there in your family, you haven't dealt with it. Maybe there was abuse, you haven't dealt with it. Maybe you were adopted and it really has bothered you all your life, you have not dealt with it. That's where these things happen. You have to get to the roots and do some homework and find out where it is that this weakness is causing you to do this destructive behavior. And the thing is, if it's something that you believe has gone to an addiction, like you watch nasty movies, you play with Angela, you do all kinds of stuff that way, then you need to actually get professional help to take care of that and to help you walk out of that. I know lots of mentors, coaching, if it's men, they don't want to admit to it. So I know some men coaches and mentors that would be happy to help if you didn't want to get professional help, because a lot of this begins with your spirit. So a lot of the addictions is a brokenness in your spirit, which you didn't listen to and you thought with your head, and the head got you all messed up. And we all do this at some point. And as we get older, like my age, then we figure things out a little bit more with wisdom and stuff, and we either grow or we're stuck. Majority of us grow and we don't want to repeat those habits and those vices, and we want to replace them with healthy ones because we want to live a long time for our kids and our grandkids. So I would hope that if you're young, that you're getting this information early, break those bad habits, break those bad vices. If you have an addiction, time to look into it and why you have it. Maybe it is something that you can tackle on your own, but a lot of them is not. It's sort of like working in the hospital. We had a patient that, thought that they could deal with it. And these are rotating patients that end up thinking that they can deal with it and they can't. And then they stay clean for a little bit, but then they get that craving that they just can't. And then they go back. And then one was so bad. I'm going to share this with you for a second before we go, is that this woman, it was so bad. Okay. It was so bad. She was meth addict. So bad that at first she was fine. Of course, you see all the pictures, then the face, and then but it got so bad that she began to eat her own skin. She picked at her face so much. This became from a habit to a vice to an addiction, and the addiction became a vice, and the vice became a habit. So it reversed, and she would pick off her skin of her face so much that you could see down into the muscle of her cheeks and her face. Literally. You talk about a zombie movie? Literally. It scared a couple people when they weren't prepared and they went in there. And this is what I'm talking about. Now, this person, there was another patient who actually I thought was on her deathbed. And I would have to go in there every day. And I thought for sure she was going to be gone the next time I came back, because I had like 5 days off. And then I came back, and lo and behold, she wasn't even there before. She was hallucinating and, everything. And also skin and bones. Came back 5 days later, and she's up, and she's got a little bit of color in her. She's awake. She's alive. But this is what the transformation can do. And that's why I have Get Balanced 2020. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a professional addiction counselor. I'm not that. But I have worked and been in all these industries. I've studied psychology. I've studied so many things. But the thing is, I enjoy being a coach, and that is why I do these videos, to help you to free yourself from your chains and your bonds, to get the freedom that you need so that you can grow to the person that God planted you on this earth to be for your purpose and calling, because everybody has one. But we got to stop the bad vices. We got to stop the bad habits. And the only way to do that is get to that little person inside, find out what was broken at what age, what time, sit there and address it, because until you address the soul part of you that can actually get to the spirit, and we can restore and rebuild, you're going to play this pattern over and over and over and over again. Lastly, when I talked in the very beginning, the way that I teach and the way that I coach, I usually coach and teach from spirit first. And the reason being, they're like, oh, here she goes. It's all about religion. No, it has nothing to do with religion at all. Because religion is man-made. A relationship with your divine God, your universe, whoever it is. I prefer God because God is a mighty, mighty creator. Anyway, but that's what I believe in, and that's where spirit is. I am spirit. I am a spirit. I am spirit. And so spirit is truth, spirit is love, and spirit is light. The one thing that we are not is fear. Fear is a negative energy vibration, something that keeps us grounded, keeps us from growing, keeps us from our our potential, keeps us from our purpose and our calling. So we either have two choices in spirit. We either make our decision and choices out of love, or we make it out of fear. So you have to sit there and put that in your pros and cons as well. Am I making my vice choices out of love? Am I making my vice choices out of fear? And where is that fear coming from? Because it is buried way down inside you somewhere. Something caused you fear to do the things that you're doing. I've been there. I've broken my chains. Life is so freeing when you figure yourself out and love yourself and value yourself enough. Number 2, I teach about mind, because spirit actually speaks to your mind. Mind is about your soul. Mind is your soul, your personality, your character. So when the spirit speaks to your soul and your mind, It's telling you to do something in truth and love. But our head gets in the way and we're like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. Or I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And then that's when we get into trouble, because our mind then speaks to our body and tells our body how to speak, how to act, how to react based on our souls, our character, and our personality. Now, if we were to go backwards and get our soul right with our spirit, with the way that we're designed to be in love and truth, then we can actually restart, reset, and actually move ourselves forward in a positive manner. Then our mouth and our actions are not road raging. They're not doing all this stuff. We're staying calm. We're growing in positive. We're growing in strength. We're growing in love. We're growing in the way that God wants us to be, caring people for other people and loving ourselves. That's it. So that's where we have to look at where our vices are coming from, because most of the time they're coming from here and not here. And so we can get to restore here, and we can restore, rebuild, and grow and have an awesome life. And you know what? If you're really in it 100%, 200% to change your bad habits and your bad vices, then it will go like this. It will seem to be all of a sudden like, well, it wasn't as that hard as I thought it was, because you're all in, and God is ready to work with you. It's the ones that are like, she's full of crap. Oh, I'll do that later. And then 10 years down the road, I wish I would have listened to him. I'm older than a lot of you people out there, and here's the reason why. It's not only experience, it's wisdom from the divine. It's also wisdom through experience, education, knowledge, blood, sweat, and tears. And also being one of those stubborn people that thought with this and wouldn't allow myself to think with that. So with that, I'm going to leave you with that. Now do some of your homework. Sit down with that piece of paper and pencil. Do the pros and cons. Put your bad habits, vices on one side. Put your good ones on the other side. See which one outweighs the other. I bet you those cons weigh out the pros. And it's time to transform and switch. So watch the next video, habits versus bad habits versus good habits, and how to transform those to good habits. And that will help you get on track with the next set of tools to do that. If you like this channel, if you want to look at more videos, or you have comments or feedback, please make a comment down below. I do my videos live a lot, so if somebody pops in, I love to know where everybody's coming from. But also, too, subscribe. Hit that bell so you can get notifications when I am on live, or you can get the new uploads. And I am on Facebook and Instagram, as you can see below. Come and say hello and get some inspiration and share the love, because that's what it's about. Love, love, love. All right, we'll talk to you soon. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.